Last night at the World Series of Poker, Daniel Negreanu busted out in 11th place to Joe McKeon. And the bust out hand was actually pretty interesting. Got a good amount of debate going on in the forums, so I thought it would be a fun hand to cover here with you guys. So the situation here is it's down to the final 11 players, and Daniel Negreanu's in the big blind with ace-4 off. Action folds to Joe McKeon in the button, who by all accounts has been opening any 2 cards from the button so far. And once again, he opens for a min, small blind folds, and this is the first of 2 decision points where people are disagreeing with what Daniel did. So most people are saying that they would just 3-bet shove here, and clearly it's the best move, and there's nothing else to think about. But Daniel decides to just flat call. So here we need to compare the EV of 3-bet shoving to the EV of flat calling. Finding out the EV of 3-bet shoving is pretty easy. You just put in ICMIZER what you think the button is going to be opening and what you think he's going to be calling against your shove, and you just get the pure math answer for what's absolutely correct and what's not. Finding the EV of flat calling is practically impossible right now, so you just need to use intuition and make your best guess, which is what we're going to be doing here. So let's start with the easier decision for finding out what the EV of 3-bet shoving is. Throw this into ICMIZER. So people were saying that he was opening any 2 cards. It's possible, but I think it's a little more likely that he's going to be folding something. So I chopped off the bottom 10% of his range. And for a calling range, let's try and give him something somewhat realistic. Something like this, I think, is reasonable. Daniel made a blog post, and one of the first things he said was he was not interested in only making the final table. He really just wanted to go for the win. It was first place or nothing for him. So, in fairness, I'm going to first look at this through chip EV, and then I'll take a look at the effects of ICM on this hand. So if we have the button opening 90% and calling 35%, not surprisingly, Daniel can 3-bet shove any 2 cards. And with ace-4 off, he is making 2.42 big blinds per hand, which is a considerable amount to make. So I want to look over here at the hand EV chart. And we can see that around 35%, we're actually at the worst case scenario. If the opponent is calling a lot more, it's going to be making more money, and if he's calling any tighter, it's going to be making a lot more money as well. So this is the worst case scenario, and we're doing pretty damn good with the hand. That's not to say that flat calling can't be doing better, but we're already doing really well here, so it's hard to believe that flat calling is going to be doing a lot better. Now I'm going to take a look at ICM EV. And with the same opening percent and the same calling percent, we actually have a considerable folding range here, and opting not to 3-bet shove. But ace-4 off is still doing pretty damn well. And if we look at the hand EV chart, it's actually doing a lot worse the wider that our opponent calls, where before, when he called wider, we were doing better. Here we can actually do worse if he's calling wider. But I think it's not very likely that the opponent is calling much wider than 35%. I think about the widest I can see being reasonable to expect would be, this is arbitrary, but something about like this, like 40% of all hands, in which case ace-4 off is pretty much doing the same. It's still pretty high EV. If you're not familiar with ICM in these programs, this is 0.33% of the total prize pool, which may not seem like a lot, but it definitely is. Making 0.33% of the total prize pool per hand is pretty huge. Definitely not something you want to pass up on, but again, that doesn't mean that it has to be better than flat calling. So thinking about flat calling here, Daniel lists 3 reasons why he thinks it's better to flat call here. Reason 1 is it balances his range from his calling range from the blinds, which I'm not really a fan of the argument of balance for the sake of balance, but it ties into the second thing he said, which was he will get extra value post flop when he hits an ace. His opponent can't check an ace high board. So yeah, like if the button is going to be going crazy on ace high flops, then obviously ace X hands increase in equity or increase their EV when that happens relative to if he wasn't going crazy. But ace high boards don't always come out. There's going to be other boards, but it's still definitely in effect. If the guy's going absolutely crazy on a particular board type, then having hands that hit that board are beneficial. That doesn't mean that they're doing better than shoving, and we can already see that shoving's doing really well, but it definitely strengthens the argument for it. So there's a couple of things here, like having your range being balanced, the guy attacking ace high flops. When you're short stacked like this, the stack to pot ratio on the flop is going to be fairly small. It's not that important that your range be uncapped. Like if you have no aces, it's not that great. If you're 100 big blinds deep, it's pretty terrible. But the shorter you get, say if you're 7 big blinds deep and you flat call, if you're capped on an ace high board, it doesn't really matter as much because your opponent can't apply that much pressure. There's only so much money that can go in the pot, and you're still able to get it in with second pair, third pair draws. So the effect gets less and less the shallower the stack to pot ratio gets. But this definitely can still be an area where you might want to have some ace-x hands in your range if your opponent's going to be going pretty crazy on them. So, like, I can't come to any conclusive answer here. I think that it probably is reasonably close. My intuition is that probably favors shoving. The thing here is the button's opening 90% of hands, and he's probably going to be folding very often and just giving a lot of EV. So you're already like at a point where you're making a ton of money with your shoves with ace-4 off. So it could be that you're making a lot of money while you're flat calling. I mean, you almost definitely are, but it's hard to outperform by a lot the shoves. So like as far as the flat call being like a huge mistake, I don't think it's a huge mistake. It's possible that it was the better play, and I wouldn't argue to the death that it isn't. Personally, I would slightly prefer jamming, but I can definitely see the reasoning for doing that. So yeah, nothing amazing there. I think it's just kind of close. I'm okay with the flat call. Now let's look at the second part that people are having a big issue with. So on this ace king 10 2 diamond board, Daniel checks and Joe bets out about 33% of the pot, and Daniel check shoves all in. So some people didn't think much of this, some people thought it was a big mistake, some didn't. I personally think it's probably a pretty big mistake. One of the reasons that he argued for the flat call pre was that his opponent was going to be presumably going crazy on ace high flops, and I mean this is preventing him from getting to go crazy on ace high flops. It's not, you know, the best ace high flop that he could have gotten, but he's definitely stopping a good amount of bluffs from getting to bluff more. The other issue with this, especially being a tournament relative to cash games, you're already capped on an ace high board, which is one of the reasons that that Daniel liked having the ace-4 off in his range for calling. But the fact that you're capped, and specifically on this board you're pretty capped, means that if you're check shoving the hands that hit this board, you don't have that many of them that are very strong. So if you're check raising them, it leaves your check calling range extremely capped, and that's a lot more of a problem in a tournament than it is in a cash game, where, you know, in a cash game you can call off a lot wider than you can in a tournament, especially against the chip leader, when I think Daniel was 9th in chips out of 11 at this point. Still high enough up that it's a considerable amount of equity to be getting involved in and having to fold or lose. So the fact that you can't call down as wide means that being even further capped in your check calling range is that much worse in a tournament. Daniel saying he doesn't care about ICM here, basically, by saying that he's just going for first here. He's not concerned with only getting to the final table. Even in that case, like if this were chip EV, like a cash game, I think check raising makes sense, but I don't think check raising all in makes as much sense. I think check raising pretty small here, with most of the ace-x that you might have in your range, and then a couple of your like jack-x, queen-x, maybe some of your kings, is going to be fine. But again, in a tournament where most people care about the pay jumps in the World Series main event. The ICM is pretty heavy, and further capping your range here just seems very, 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 very bad. And even in a cash game, I'm not entirely sure that having the small check raising range is right, but it seems like it should be. But once ICM is accounted for, it's very dangerous to cap your range there. So overall, I think the pre-flop decision, it just has to be fairly close. Flat calling is absolutely going to be plus EV. Shoving is, we've shown here, is definitely plus EV. And the difference in EV really depends on a lot of factors that are very hard to account for. I imagine that they're generally going to run fairly close. And maybe it's best to have some offsuit low aces like this in a mixed strategy, sometimes shoving, sometimes calling. But when you have a guy that's going that hard to exploit, going that far out of his way and raising 90%, 100% of hands, he's just giving you so much money with your ace-x 3-bet shoves that it seems likely that it's better as a shove. Exploitatively. That I think is close. The check shove on the flop I think isn't, and I would like to see a good argument for the check shove, but I hope this isn't like taken as a knock on Daniel. I'm a big fan of his, and I respect, but I think he made a mistake here on the flop. So let me know what you guys think about this hand. And let me know if you maybe caught something that I didn't, and we can get a good discussion going.